Using dynamic ad insertion or DAI for your podcast gives you a lot of flexibility when it comes to how and where your ads are run. The exact process of scheduling an advertising campaign is going to vary depending on your podcast host provider. Today, I'm going to show you how to set up an ad campaign using Megaphone, our network's preferred podcast host provider. This would be considered a direct sales ad campaign. That means either you or perhaps your network or another external sales team is working directly with a brand or their agency, and you are creating an ad campaign together. These are not promos. These are not programmatic ads. These are ad campaigns that usually have a campaign order that spells out exactly what's involved, which is usually you writing and voicing an ad for them and playing it on your podcast. If you're working with a network or external ad sales team, they may be creating these campaigns for you. But many times it's a non exclusive agreement. So you could find your own advertisers and also run your own ad campaigns, which is what we do at Independent Podcast Network. If you do run your own ads, you need to know how the system works. So let's go to Megaphone. Here's how you create a direct sales ad campaign using Megaphone. This is your Megaphone dashboard, and you're going to take your cursor and come over here and select campaigns. And what you're going to see here are any other campaigns that have ever run that are part of your account. To create a new ad campaign, you're going to come up here, click Create Campaign. Now, think of this as the shell for your campaign. You've got an overarching campaign, and then you've got orders that can happen within that campaign. So right now, we're just thinking about the big picture here. So you're going to call your campaign something. Usually it's just, the name of the company. Let's just say ABC Company. And not all of this information is needed, okay? A lot of this is just for your information. Megaphone is trying to make it easy to keep all notes and everything attached to these campaigns and to these orders so that it doesn't end up on someone's desk and no one else can find it. It's really meant more for larger networks, but smaller networks can use this too. It's a good idea to get very organized, and hopefully your network will grow, and then you'll actually need all these features, right? Okay, so we named the campaign. You could adjust this if you have ad copy, need copy. Again, that's not mandatory. This section here is, so you have to select an advertiser. And if you already have advertisers in here and this is a repeat campaign, then you can scroll through and select one of these advertisers. If the advertiser is not there, you're going to have to come over here and click Create an Advertiser. Now, this is important. For anyone that's listening now that is part of our podcast network, obviously there's multiple podcasts that are on our account for Independent Podcast Network. And so we have our permissions set up a little bit differently. The way we have stuff set up here is all of you as the podcasters, each of you are your own agency. Okay? That's how we've set things up. So you would scroll here, find your name, and let's just say I'm going to select Independent Podcast Network. But your name would be listed there as the agency. And then you could go ahead and type in the new advertiser name. So ABC Company. Now, it is going to require you to select at least one competitive category. So one of these categories over here. So just pick whichever one, fits it best. Let's say this one is clothing and fashion. And then you just have to do one of these subcategories. So boom. All right. So select at least one and then click Create. Okay. So now I can come back in here and I'm looking for ABC Company, or I can just kind of type it in here. There we go. And now I can add my advertiser. So that's an important step. If you aren't part of our network, you can set things up pretty much however you want because you're going to have full admin privileges. But this is just how we have to set it up because we've got a lot of podcasts on our network and we don't want everybody to see everyone else's campaigns. Okay, so down here, you can select this information if you want. Is this a gross Pricing, is it net? What is the campaign budget? I don't usually use a lot of these features, but if you got multiple campaigns running and you want to take a quick glance to see how much money you're going to make, that's one way you can do it. Any other attachments, you can attach them here. But the only thing that's required, campaign name and advertiser. Then you're going to come up here and click Save. Okay, now this is the place where we add our orders. So, for example, let's say the overall campaign is a pre-roll spot and a mid-roll spot. So now is the time where you actually create the orders, one for the pre-roll spot and one for a mid-roll spot, but it's part of the same campaign, right? If you had multiple podcasts and an advertiser was running on all of the shows or multiple shows, you could set it up that way as well, where the orders are for, let's say you've got 5 podcasts and the advertiser purchased a mid-roll spot on all of them. You could set it up that way. So each of those podcasts would have their own order and all the information contained with it. Okay, so let's go ahead and create an order. Let's walk through this process. So I think most of you are going to have a single podcast that are watching this, so I'm going to just do an example for that. You have to give it some sort of title. Okay, so this is the standard way I typically set things up. So this isn't the actual name of the company. This would be ABC Company. Okay, and then mid-roll, and then this would be the name of the podcast. That's just my preference. Technically, you can put anything in here as long as you are going to understand what it means. That's it. You can have your own naming scheme here. All right, continuing down. And by the way, we are in this first tab here. There's multiple tabs at the top, but let's just focus on the first one. Impressions. Now, I think this is really, really important. Goal isn't as important, like what's the goal, what's the amount of impressions you want to have. Cap is most important. So cap, if you put a number in here and the campaign reaches that number, the campaign will then stop. So it's putting a cap on the amount of people or impressions, downloads, if you want to look at it that way, a campaign can have. And that's really important because you may want something to cap, and because that's what the advertiser asked for, and they're not going to pay you any more money. So you would want the campaign to automatically cap, so then you can run programmatic ads or, start another campaign with a different advertiser immediately afterward. So that's what cap is. So you can, let's say it's 10,000 downloads. There you go. That's your cap. So if I kept this in here, then this campaign would cap, it would stop once it reached 10,000 episodes. And I have to be honest, it's not exact. It's never going to be exact. So when you see how many downloads this actually got, let's say it reached 10,000, it may be like 10,052. Or I've even seen, a couple hundred downloads more. It's not exact. It probably depends on how fast people are listening. If you've got a bigger podcast, there's going to be more people listening at once, and it's going to be harder to calculate, but it will turn off. And we want to be able to do that, right? We want to have more control. Otherwise, you would be checking every day to see if you're close and then capping it manually. That would be really difficult. So that feature is really important. There's a lot of stuff on here. We're not going to go into a lot of detail. I just want to cover some of the big things. So if you are given a tracking URL from the advertiser, that is one way they can track and see what's going on and what people are doing after they hear an ad. So you would add the tracking URL here. Okay. And you can have multiple tracking URLs in Megaphone. You just you keep adding, just click this button over here. Okay. This is not mandatory, but if you want to include what the CPM rate is, let's say let's be generous. Let's say it's a $40 CPM. You can enter that there. Or if it's a flat rate, you can write the amount in here. This is just for you though. Now, this is really important. This is telling you the position that the ad is going to run, as well as the priority. So the position means, okay, let's say I've got 4 mid-roll spots in a show. The first position is going to be the first one that hits in the show. The second position, the second one, and so on. Okay? So you can say, listen, I don't want it to be the first ad. I want it to be the second ad. And in that case, you would come in here and you would change this. You can also set it to no position. The problem with that is it's not going to show up in inventory. And I want to encourage you guys to use inventory as much as possible so you can keep track of what you still have to sell and what's still available. But no position just means I believe it's first available. Okay. So you're not really assigning a spot for it. I don't have a use case really for that. I want to know exactly where things are running. So I never use that. So I'm just going to change this back to the first position. Priority. Okay. So you can have two separate orders set for the exact same position on the exact same show. You can give one priority 1 and one priority 2. What that would mean is after the first campaign is done, whatever is listed as priority 1, let's say that's capped at 10,000 episodes, then that campaign would automatically turn off. And if you had another campaign for the same position, same podcast, same dates and everything, and it was labeled priority 2, then that ad would automatically start running. So this is, you got to kind of, this multi-layered, right? You have to think about it that way. I rarely use priority, but I have done it in the past. Okay. There's some fancy things here with capping the frequency and stuff. Geo-targeting. So I talk about this in the videos. And if you want to control who this goes out to based on their country, their region, zip code, you can enter that information here. You just select from the list. Or, so this is inclusions, or you can exclude. So that's important. Device targeting. So if you only want it to go out on certain types of devices, you can do that. Now, this is the most important, really. Start and end date. You have to have an end date for a campaign. You can't just say forever and ever. You have to have an end date. I usually just leave the times. The default is, 12 a.m. to 11:59 p.m. I just leave it like that. But if you wanted it to start at whatever, 10 a.m., you could do that. Make sure you notice the time zone because that could throw things off if you're not on the right time zone. But you're going to have to select an end date or a start date and an end date. And then I think that's it on this page. Let's go. So that was all details. There's a lot on details, okay? Now we're going to go to advertisements. This is where you tell the system, is this a pre-roll or a mid-roll? And it's also where you upload whatever your file is that you want to run. So if you've created this ad spot, this is where you would upload it. But first you have to tell it, the system, is it a pre-roll, mid-roll, or post-roll? Most of the time, they're going to be mid-roll spots. You could have some advertisers that want pre-rolls. It's rarely going to be a post-roll. So then from here, I would upload my audio. So I found an MP3, open, and it's going to upload. So wait till it's done uploading. All right. So that indicates that this is now set, and it's set as a mid-roll. Then I'm going to go to my third tab up here. This is where I target where I want the ad to run. Most times, it's just going to be on any given podcast because you've already set your start date and end date, right? So let's say an advertiser wants to run this order for a month. So you've already set it. Let's say it's for the entire month of May. You've set it May 1st to May 31st. Now you're coming in and telling the system on what podcast or what episode or given what tags do you want the spot to run. So let's first start with episodes. I don't use this very much, but if you wanted it to run on a specific show, you would just go ahead and, I don't know why most of my podcasts aren't showing up here, but you would select the show and then select whatever the episode was. So, or if it's multiple episodes, you can do that as well. I rarely do this. Usually I want it to run on all episodes of my podcast, whatever it is. So in that case, I would come here and let's say I want it to run, what did I select before? This show? We'll go ahead and select that. Okay. And then, so I've targeted this on this podcast. You can also use tags. I have never used this before, but if you wanted to go through all of your episodes, and this happens in the upload process, so it's on an episode by episode basis. So you would go in and in those episodes, you would give each episode a different tag. So that could be according to the various types, like let's say it's a given series, and you want it to run on this series that, that you do every, one episode a month. Or let's just say it's just based on the content. So anytime you talk about pregnancy topics, you give that episode a pregnancy tag. Then you could come in here and like I said, I don't really use this, but you can select whatever it is. And then the ad would only play on episodes that have been given that tag. But most of the time, it's going to be this. You're just going to select the whole podcast, okay? And then over here in ad copy, I rarely use this. But again, if you have a larger group of people and you want to keep everything together along with the campaign and the orders, you can certainly add this information, any kind of attachments. Looks like there's just a notes section. I literally never do anything here, okay? So when you're done with all that, you click Save. If you have made any errors or there's anything that you had to enter information for that you didn't, it will give you, basically an error and you'll have to go back and fix it. And it usually tells you what the problem is. So what this tells me now is that ad spot that I uploaded, it's basically processing. Okay. So it's not going to run. Like if you set up this campaign and you wanted it to run immediately, just know it's not going to run until it's done processing. How long does it take? It really depends. It's usually a few minutes. And when I believe it says complete, when it's done, then you know it's running. And this is nice too, because you'll be able to see, right? We gave it a 10,000 cap, 10,000 impression cap, and this will count for you until it gets to around 10,000. And then based on how I had this set up, the campaign is automatically going to stop. Okay, so that is how you create direct sales ad campaigns in Megaphone. For more information about how we here at Independent Podcast Network can help you find more advertisers for your podcast and create and manage these campaigns for you, click the link in the description.